Hello and welcome. You are listening to the Gay with God podcast, a safe place for us to share our stories and support one another. How long did we know? What challenges did we face? Did we lose our faith? When did we find our way back home? Or are we still searching? The stories you hear on this podcast will melt your heart and strengthen your belief that in God, all things are possible, and you can be authentically gay with the God of your understanding. I am your host, Midge Noble, and I am very honored that you are here. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Gay with God podcast. I am Midge Noble, your host, and aren't we all a little bit weary? If you've been watching the news lately, besides the big regime issues, we now have more loss of life and tragic storms that are sweeping through our states, especially here in North Carolina. We are still so far from getting people back in their homes and getting people served after Hurricane Helene and all of the terrible, terrible flooding that Western North Carolina took on this past year. And now with the newest floods in Texas and Camp Mystic and all of those beautiful children and counselors and adult lives lost, it is just heartbreaking. So again, I come to you and I say, we've got this. We will overcome. I don't know how long it will take, but we will. But that seems so shallow right now and hollow, and it just sounds like rhetoric. Over the weekend, I was able to look on Facebook to find a guy that I follow often. I'd been kind of out of it this past few months with, the cataract surgeries and not being able to see very well, and so I've not been reading as much and keeping up with as many things as I wanted to. But there's a guy that I have followed on Facebook named Stephen Charleston, and if you've ever read the Bishop of Mars, and we talked about that many, many, many months ago, but he was the author of the Bishop of Mars and is a retired bishop, and he has a public page that he does many good quotes and many uplifting and affirming topics. And his last topic on July 7th was restorative, not reactive, and I quote, "I have been thinking about how I respond to things these days. Am I helping to restore the world around me, or am I caught up in a cycle of reactions? Some people may want me on a hamster wheel. I have thought of that too. I want to be restorative, not just reactive." And that hit me right in between the eyes, because I know that I'm reactive. And I haven't told very many people this, but I do believe that if I have a smidge of anything inside of me, it may be reactive attachment disorder, because it's very hard for me to fully trust. I push people away from anxiety often. And so that's why for my wife and I to have met in 1983 and we are still together is a miracle for me, because there are many times that I tried to push that relationship away just out of the anxiety of thinking that it's going to go bad, and I didn't want to stay in it if it was bad. So I created those magical thoughts that is sort of like a protection for me, that I create these thoughts, I think, and then I'm like, well, if it's going to go like that, then, I'm out. But over the years, of course, being loved by my wife and having us go through really, really tough times that should have ended our relationship many times, it didn't, because both of us are so committed to the love that we have and the way our souls met. And so I've been able to work through some of that. But in my life in general, when things happen and I get scared and that anxiety comes up again, my first impulse is to push back, to be resistant and reactive. And the staying in that low boil of anger and frustration and then it goes to rage, that that's my protective wall. And I know that, and sometimes I can overcome that, and other times I can't. And this whole saga with the regime that we are in now has heightened my reactive responses to a level that I just don't like myself sometimes. And then there are times that I can regroup and I can get back to my soul and my ability to renew myself, and I can be productive and I can be restorative. So when Stephen Charleston said that, he wants to be restorative and not just reactive, oh, I pray for that. That is my new prayer, that I will be a restorative, renewing place on this earth. Because if I'm not, my whole life that I think God has created for me is for nothing. If I'm part of the problem, I'm not being what I think that God has called me to be, which is the voice of not only speaking truth to power, but speaking it out of that love that we talked about, that I would speak it out of love and not reactive anger. So then I started thinking, well, how does that match up with our walk and talk with Jesus? Now we know he's kicked over tables. That gives me a little bit of hope that I'm not totally a lost soul. But he always had like a reason for when he would be angry, when he would speak up to people in charge, the spiritual leaders of the day, and the Roman power structure. He was not at all reactive as much as he spent his entire ministry to restore and to renew. And we see that in many different parts of the Bible where he was doing acts of healing and forgiveness and reconciliation. When he healed the sick and he did miracles, like when he restored the leper in Mark chapter 1 and the paralytic in Mark chapter 2, he relieved physical suffering, and he also restored those individuals to their communities. And so, what kind of an effect do you think that would have then had, as people saw them as so much negativity and they saw them with so much disgust and fear? And then he was able to heal them and restore them back into their communities. I wonder how their communities changed after that and what impact that had on them. What if I could then be an agent of change and maybe not physically heal someone, but be there to be compassionate on someone's pain? And I've seen comments where people are laughing about what's happening in Texas and all of the flooding because they see that as a red state. And absolutely, that is reactive and not coming from a place of our souls being renewed to see them as people. However, they voted, whoever they're pulling for, we are still connected as brothers and sisters. And so, our soul, if it totally wants to be restorative and renewed, needs to stay in contact with the compassion of other humans suffering, because we want that for ourselves. We're suffering. The LGBTQIA plus community is suffering. And it is hard to stand back and see someone else who's trying to harm you as human when they don't see you as human. I get that. I totally, totally get that. And yet I am trying to also bring my energy level back up to a renewing kind of disc that flies through the earth instead of staying in that reactive state. Jesus also showed his restorative power when he forgave sins. And you and I both know that forgiving someone who's harmed you is like totally, totally the big time thing that we all try to accomplish when we've been harmed. I remember the story where Jesus got involved when everyone wanted to stone the prostitute, and he just started writing their own missing the mark kind of behaviors, and then said, if who is, not sinned, cast the first stone, and then said to her, you know, go and don't do this anymore. Turn around from this basically and don't do this anymore. And he extended grace to her. And he also was able to restore his authority over the whole situation. So we, on both sides of the aisle in this situation with the current regime, we are all finding ways to implode our souls. And we think we've got it all right because we can see through what's happening. And yet, by how we're reacting, we're on the level playing ground. We're just hurting people in different ways. And so, the goal for me is to be able to not only find the forgiveness for myself when I miss the mark, but understand that calling names or diminishing someone's value is like diminishing Jesus, because we that quote's been going all over the internet anymore with in Matthew about feeding the poor and and it's a good one. It's a good one. Jesus wants us to take care of other people and feed them and clothe them and give them water. And yet, Jesus also is probably not wanting us to slur insults at the other side and become just as angry and violent in our souls, even if we don't throw a weapon, we don't do anything like that. But it's our souls that's still generating the weapons out of our mouth. And to be very mindful of understanding that we're all missing the mark and we all need God's forgiveness for what we're doing and how we're trying to put our energy out into the world. And I'm putting myself at the front of the list. I'm not, I'm right there with any of you who are resonating with this. I'm right there with you, and I want to do better. Jesus restored by reconciling relationships, like that parable in the prodigal son in Luke chapter 15. That really shows a father's deep love. And, it illustrates Jesus's message of forgiveness and reconciliation all over the place. So, for a father to have unconditional love, he is trying to demonstrate for us that God has unyielding and unconditional love for us, even when we look to the other side of the aisle and we see our brothers and sisters praying at, before and cheering after passing this very big, ugly bill. And yet God would forgive any of them if they turned around and said, I need forgiveness. I messed up. I missed the mark. And yes, it's hard to forgive when anybody hurts another person that we love. When we are hurt, we get reactive and want to hurt back to save ourselves. I don't think I could ever be a pacifist necessarily, although I don't really like war and I don't want to ever have us go to war and I don't really like guns, but I have a fierce anger issue and I would probably not be a pacifist if someone hurt me or hurt someone in my family. So it's a hard call. And yet, Jesus was here to show us that standing in that moment, and Martin Luther King was here to show us that. Mahatma Gandhi was here to show us that. So many spiritual leaders who tried to tell us and teach us that being reactive is not healthy and it's not of Jesus. None of that is of Jesus. Jesus was able to restore Peter after he denied him 3 times. And so restoration comes in being able to say to someone, I see that you missed the mark, basically. Now, there's more good that you can do after that. Once we miss the mark, our journey's not over. Jesus really wants us to stand back up and go do the good fight. And by good fight, it's not really fighting, but stay in the game. Keep swinging. Keep passing that love to each other. Don't stop. So when we're restored, we get more energy, and the failure that we had, even if it's a big significant failure, I mean, it might have been the biggest bad thing you've ever done, but then we have a new life to live after that. What new direction will we go? How will we take the failures of our past and bring them into some sort of restoration and renewal for other people in our future. That's how we that's how we do it. And it's not like we have to continue to put like slashes on a chalkboard of how many wins we have during the day and make sure that they outweigh anything that we're embarrassed or feel bad about. I don't think that God keeps score that way, but I think that we sometimes do. I think we take the one thing that we did that was really maybe not our finest hour, and we take a sheet of paper and we cover the whole thing black. We've just failed big time. And yet, I think God sees us as a dot on the paper. It's not our whole life, and He knows that from beginning of our life until whenever our life ends, we are not a whole catastrophe. We're a dot. When we do something, it's like a dot on a piece of paper. And everything around it was probably good, maybe great. And yet we only focus on the one thing that we can't do right. But that's being a work in progress. And that's keeping ourselves humble that we aren't the voice of everything good or right. And we are not, all of us, ever going to be the one single person that people should follow, because we're all human. The only one we follow is the one that was human and divine. And clearly, he really did the divine thing because, he was brought up into heaven. So it is important for us to keep perspective that we are not the Son of God. We may have a little piece of his divinity in us when he breathed life into us, but we are not wholly divine. We are not even part human, part divine. We are just human. And we do human things, and it's not always good, and it's not always right, and it never, ever will be. So we got to look at that dot on the paper. Even if you have 10 dots on the paper, it's still not the whole sheet. So we look at those things individually and we say, okay, I missed the mark. How can I renew myself and make it right for others? And you may never be able to apologize to the people you've harmed or the things you've done. You might not be able to redo it. You might have gotten fired by that job and they won't take you back. Yet you're going to have another job. What are you going to do with that job? What are you going to do with the next relationship that you might have blown up because of your anxiety, or you blew it up because of your insecurities, or, that next person that you see at a protest and something they said or did or a sign that they have like triggered something in you and you made a spectacle of yourself? What are you going to do? Don't stay in that dot. Don't stay in that moment and make it bigger. Find a way to understand your humanness and give yourself some grace, and know that the God of your understanding still loves you, will always love you, and there's nothing you can do about it. He will always love you. When Jesus restored Lazarus and raised him from the dead in John chapter 11, this was a huge, huge statement of how Jesus can overcome even death. And when he was able to restore Lazarus's life, that shows all of us that all things can be resurrected. And it doesn't mean that we can always make everything we did wrong right. But from that moment forward, we can be restored and be brought back out into the world after we've done something really horrible and start doing right. And Jesus, as we all know, is full of social justice. His mission to bring the wrong into the right with his teachings and how he acted just in his regular walk was so powerful. When Jesus met Zacchaeus, he met a tax collector who had not been a really cool guy and had overcharged people and done some things that, of course, missed the mark. But in this story, it is an example for us to see how when we do put a big old dot, maybe a bigger dot on our page than we wanted to put on there, that we can become something different. We can admit what we've done wrong. We can take responsibility for it. We can ask for forgiveness, whether we're forgiven or not. And then we can renew our own soul and do something completely different. We can turn it around for the next time. So I don't want us to ever think that we're one and done. We've done this one thing and we're done. We're out. We can't renew ourselves. We have the Holy Spirit and God within us that can renew us and will renew us if we continue to get back up and try again. The only one and done is if we quit. And I can promise you that quitting doesn't change anything. The only thing that's going to change what's going on in the world today, the only thing that's going to change our soul is us. By connecting back to the God of our understanding and allowing the Spirit to breathe through us and renew the broken spaces that have been there maybe our whole lives. If you find yourself being reactive, if you find yourself living in anger, if you find yourself always having to spit back, see how I know this to be true? Because it is something that I have definitely lived. We can ask for forgiveness, and we will be forgiven, and we will be renewed to start over. So we will not quit. We will stay in the fight, and the fight is still going on. Just because we now want to not be reactive and we want to be restorative doesn't mean that we're still not going to speak truth to power. If I have to say this every week, I will, I promise, because we all need to hear it. We will speak truth to power, but we want to have it from that place of love and compassion for the ones who have missed the mark. Let me say that again. We want to speak truth to power with love because the people who don't get it, it's for them. We want them to be able to find the restorative power of Jesus. And so when we do that, when we speak love to them, even if they can't hear it right now, it might be like, water dripping. And sooner or later, it's going to fill that bucket. And hopefully, as we as a community continue to come from a place of love, even though we're hurt and ravaged and scared, if we keep coming from love, and for me, with God's help, I will, because I can't do it alone, how much of an impact could that mean over a lifetime? How many caverns, have been made by water dripping on hard rock, and then there's a cavern. It is a powerful, powerful element that we really don't think about, and we take it for granted. But a drop of love is really powerful, and a constant drop of love can make big changes happen. So first we need to restore the love for ourselves inside our soul that we've been beating up every time we have missed the mark, and give ourselves some grace and ask forgiveness from the one who's loving us through all of our ugliness. And let's start over. I want to thank you guys for spending time with me today, and thank you so much for always being available and reaching out to me when you have something to share about how an episode impacts you. I appreciate that so very much. Please check out our Facebook group, Gay with God, where we do a monthly Zoom group entitled My Faith Journey. If you need support from people on Zoom, we're there to just talk about life and share our experiences. And sometimes there's a topic that we'll talk about, and you can bet the next time we meet on the group, we'll talk more about restoring and renewing ourselves. So, come and join us and lend an ear or lend an idea of how you continue to restore and renew yourself, or whether or not you're still reactive, because you're all loved here. There is no judgment, just acceptance. So go to the Facebook go to the page Gay with God, answer all the questions to make sure that you can be joined onto the inside. I need to have all those questions answered to make sure that we're all on the same heart level, basically. So answer all the questions and you'll be invited inside. If you need support to help you through your coming out and or faith journey, go to the show page at empoweredmidge.podbean.com. Scroll all the way to the bottom and see how you can connect with me, and also that confidential and complimentary session is also on each show page. So if you're on the particular show page and hearing this right now, just go to the show page notes for this episode and you'll see how to connect with me. If you are listening to this podcast and are questioning whether you can be gay and be in a relationship with the God of your understanding, if you identify as LGBTQIA+, are not even sure if you're gay, God has always been within you. Even when you didn't know it, you have always been gay with God. Thank you, everybody. Stay tuned to see how you can join the Gay with God community. Make sure that if you want to be a member of this episode or any episodes and you want to be a guest on the show, that you also request a guest taping, and you can do that from the show page also at empoweredmidge.podbean.com. And if you'd like a copy of my memoir, Gay with God, Reclaiming My Faith, Honoring My Story, and you want to get it signed by me, you can purchase the book anywhere. But if you want to have it signed by me, you can get your copy from my website, gaywithgod.com. Thank you, everybody. And remember, as always, you are loved. I want to invite you to become a part of the Gay with God community. How can you do that? Stay connected by messaging me your thoughts and comments in the comment section under the downloads of the show on the Gay with God show page. Subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen and share so we can increase our community outreach and be a light to those who are struggling to claim their faith. Consider being a sponsor so I can highlight your service in our community. We are all worthy of respect and a relationship with the God of our understanding. I want to thank you in advance for supporting this podcast. Together, we as a community will keep this show visible and our community stronger. Deep gratitude to my friend Tim McClendon of Tim McClendon Music for allowing me to use an excerpt from Interlude 4, a song found on his CD entitled Sundance.